Today, good morning, is an important day.
Good morning, Rosh Yeshivat.
For Klal Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. And the question is, to vote or not to vote? So since the establishment of the State of Israel, there's been a majority opinion of Haredim, people who believe the Torah should be our guide and guided by the greatest poskim of the day, as the Chazon Ish, who was the greatest authority in Halakha 2 generations ago. And he said, as was said by previous generations, today we don't have a Sanhedrin, but what is in place of the Sanhedrin, a somewhat weaker level. Throughout the generations, Am Yisrael has followed the principle of listening to the Chachamim, which is mentioned in the 70th chapter of Dvarim, where it says, if you've got any doubts about anything, you have to follow the greatest sages. When there's a possibility to have a Sanhedrin, then the greatest sages were members. And there the principle was, Acher Ram Lahatot, you follow the majority. And in the development of the oral tradition, there were times when there were differences of opinion, as we see from the Mishnah and the Gemara, with the differences of opinion. And the principle was always follow the majority. When there was no longer Sanhedrin, and today there's no halachic possibility to have a Sanhedrin, therefore, throughout the ages, going back almost 2,000 years, the cessation of the Sanhedrin, Am Yisrael, true to Torah, have followed the majority. And frequently there was a minority opinion. And therefore the same applies, the Chazon Ish said, in our day. So since the establishment of the state, I would say the majority of the Haredim, of those who were really true to the Torah, they decided that one should make a vote for those parties who keep to the Torah and listen to the majority of the Gedolim and would follow them. There was a minority opinion of the Satmarov, who said, and he was a Rosh Hasidim, that since there are also elements in the government of the State of Israel from its beginning till today that don't believe in the Torah and don't follow the sages, therefore we're not yet ready. Until the Mashiach will come. And what was the view of the Chazon Ish when he was asked the question, is the State of Israel the beginning of the redemption, or is it a misleading power, even to those who keep the Torah, like a Master Satan? They want to take us away from the true path of the Torah. The view of the Satmar Rebbe was that this concept that we can have a state today, which means including a day of independence, making a new celebration, including singing the Hatikvah, which doesn't even mention anything to do with religion, including the Declaration of Independence, which is based upon pure democracy, reflecting all types of religions, and even those who are irreligious, and does not want even to mention the full name of God, just that Tzur Yisrael, the Rock of Israel, was ultimately agreed to, then we shouldn't support it. And we should carry on. Yes, there's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Israel, certainly. Mitzvah also to build up Eretz Israel. But all in accordance with the halakha. So the way things have developed, that the confrontations between the religious and also those who want to stop the religion from spreading has increased in its intensity until today. So, when the Chazon Ish was asked, what are we living? Is it really the beginning of the redemption? Is it really removing anti-Semitism as was expected? Well, he said, you can't say it's the beginning of the redemption, but he did say, Sof HaGalut. We're leading the end of the Galut of the people of Israel. And the end of the Galut is described by the sages as possibility it will go smoothly through the power of Teshuvah. So it's described in the Chumash, described by the Rambam. If people of Israel do Teshuvah, if they don't do Teshuvah, then the Sof HaGalut may be very difficult. But we're nearing the end. There's always discussion about this in the Gemara, because the Gemara says, also a debate between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. How will the Geula come? So Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is it will come through Teshuvah of the people of Israel. Yeshua says, oh no, there's so many predictions it will come through enormous suffering to the people of Israel. And it depends. If people, in the end, the discussion the Gemara Sanhedrin is, it depends what the people of Israel choose. If we choose to do Teshuvah as a nation, which means the majority will return, perhaps Kulo also, then the situation will bring Mashiach. But if we don't do Teshuvah, then we have to go through Milchemet Gog and Magog, and who knows when that can end. So, well, the contemporary situation shows us that the state of Israel has not solved the Jewish problem of anti-Semitism, it has increased it, no question. Because you can say, that certainly the element of establishing a state of our own with all the manifestations of national resurrection had brought about, as a help to bring about the extreme, even suicidal anti-Semitism which we're facing today. And we know, certainly here from Har Nof, recently, and there's so many instances, we've experienced it in a most tragic occurrence. So therefore, Rav Dessler, my teacher in many things, is a very, very great saint. He said like this, it says in the Chumash, see, I said before you today, the path of virtue, the Torah, and life, or the path of vice, not listening to the Torah, which is death. Then it says, V'chata b'chaim, you have to choose life. You have to choose the path of the Torah, then you get all the blessings. This is the same message. He said like this. He said, who's right? Are those Gedolim who say it's a Maaseh Satan correct, or those who say it's the beginning of the Geula? So he said, it depends on our Bechira. And Rav Dessler was one who in his writings, perhaps more than anyone else, developed a deep understanding of Bechira, freedom of choice. The people of Israel began through freedom of choice. Avraham Avinu chose Hashem. So Hashem chose him. At Sinai, we said Nasa v'Nisra, we chose Hashem, so Hashem chose us. And we say in every bracha, Shebachabanu b'kol ha'amim, v'natan lanu Torato. He's chosen us from all the nations, and given us the Torah. He expects us to choose him. On that basis, he chooses us. So that's the situation today. And the truth is, it says in the Gemara, and the Rambam brings it. What the Rambam brings, it's like a halacha, because the great says, Moshe ad Moshe lo kam Moshe. So the Rambam says, and it's the basis of the whole Yemei Hadin of Rosh Hashanah, that every person has to regard himself and his people and the whole world as being in the balance. If he, the individual, will now do one good deed, he may tip the balance in the direction of merit, and it will bring the redemption straight away. If, however, he chooses to do something wrong, then maybe he'll tip the balance in the other way. The same way that every election campaign, that's what they tell you. The question today, everyone tells you, your vote can tip the balance. It's well known. If you look at it, even in America it happened. A few votes brought one party, president in one party. There's only a few votes difference. But it's not only the day of election. The day of election can be very critical in certain instances, as it is with us today. So every vote counts. But really, it's every moment of our lives. This isn't Chumash. Because it's it says today. And that today refers to every day. Every day, each one of us, we have choice. Are you going to choose virtue or vice? We are given different types of temptations. Some of us are given the temptation of just lying back and not improving. For some people, that's also considered a great sin. For people who have been given so much background understanding of Torah, and they just keep silent and withdraw, it's also considered a sin. Because Hashem wants us to do our maximum, to do whatever we can, each one. And especially, we see this from this mashal of how we have to look at the world, at each one as his world. You've got the choice, this way or that way. You've got the choice constantly. So this brings me to put forward, although I have no merit, but since I've been brought up from childhood with different approaches to the dilemma that faces the world of the Torah today, so I feel it's only Hashem wants me to go and put in what I have from my forebears. My great-grandfather was one of the greatest authorities in Halakha and in Torah generally, the Aruch L'Ner. And he was in his time considered the greatest authority in Germany, but also in other places. And he was a great tzaddik himself, but he refused to be given any titles. And in his last will he said he never wants to be anyone to attach to him any name such as a Gaon or a tzaddik. And they should only write on his matzeva the different Sfarim that he wrote, Saf Beddin and Altona. And his works are very famous in the whole Torah world. And was his decisions. And he strongly believed that his time also was a time of enormous assimilation in Germany, and people even were willing to baptize themselves to go and get positions. There was also some anti-Semitism in his time. And his approach of the Halakha was, you have to apply all the laws of the Torah to every aspect of life, But if you're faced with a movement that goes against the Torah, like the reform or assimilation, you have to try to do kiruv, to bring them nearer, as is shown from Memri's decisions. And he was the next great gadol in Germany was known as the Witzbergerov, who was also his Machutan. They were close to one another, and very often they sent teshuvah to one another to see if you get the same opinion, different matters. He was highly respected by Rabbi Akiva Eger, so he belonged to the great Gedolim of the earlier period. And my grandfather was his son-in-law, so he was reared also, partly in the Hasidic world, in Hungary. In Hungary we know that the greatest posek of Hungary, the earlier times, was the Chasam Sofer, very great posek. He always signed himself as Moshe from Frankfurt, because he was reared in Frankfurt. Frankfurt was a place for generations of the greatest Gedolim of Am Yisrael, who were buried there also. And we know that a great revival of Judaism, also a bastion against the reform, was a very great man, Samson Fall Hirsch, whose influence is stronger after his death than even in his life. And he was a brilliant, one of the greatest commentators on the Chumash and the Nach, one of the greatest geniuses in giving understanding of the deeper significance of all the mitzvot, and his works were appreciated by everyone. His first work was also anonymous. His first work that he published was called the 19 Letters. And that was specifically addressed to people who were tending and going in the direction of reform Judaism. It couldn't perhaps reach so much those who already assimilated completely, but it helped many people get a stronger understanding of the challenge of the day and the importance of touching the Torah. Then he wrote the Chorev, which was a Shulchan Aruch, which gave the laws of the practical laws we have to fulfill, with giving the reasons in a manner that would be most acceptable to the more assimilated and highly educated in general philosophy and ideas of that generation. So, my father, he kept great loyalty to my grandfather, who took up the position in Frankfurt to become the rabbi of the general community under certain conditions, which were approved of by the Witzbergerov and approved of also by many other Gedolim even from Hungary, who were some of his teachers, which was that Rav Hirsch, he didn't start his great movement in education with the Kehillah. He did not start with the synagogue. Why? Because the synagogues in Germany were part of the general Jewish community, which also included the Reform. With the general, you had to register in the early times when Rav Hirsch came to Frankfurt. You had to register with all the Jews who were entered with the community. And the community was recognized by the government. And if you wanted to start a synagogue, fine, you do it with the community. So in Frankfurt, it became a bastion of the Reform. And there were some religious people there who said, we can't continue this way. The general community is going towards the Reform. We need a strong personality who will create a revival. So they employed Rav Hirsch, and he built up what he called a religious society, he could call it. That religious society was a true Torah Kehillah. And all the greater Talmidei Chachamim of Frankfurt joined it. And then he built up a school. And the school appealed also to the reformers. His way of school was very much like today, the Shuva schools and similar schools built here. It was run by the Haredim, but its approach was, let's attract as many as possible. Therefore, the secular standard was very high. In fact, he emphasized the importance of Torah and Derech Eretz. That said, to have secular knowledge on a moral basis is of great value for Jews in Western Europe, who are nurtured that we go to school to learn the sciences and the arts, and to learn the great literary giants of Western Europe. So therefore he included this. He made a big festival on the anniversary for Schiller. Schiller and Goethe were taught there constantly, apart from the sciences also. At the same time, he taught them Torah in its true manner, the pure fulfillment of mitzvot. And he reared very many people who previously were lukewarm, and they became inspired. As even until today, everyone who wants to get more deeply into Teshuvah, to Torah, and has a secular background, will get enormous inspiration from the writings of Rav Hirsch. And he worked very hard that he should get recognition for his synagogue. So he managed to get recognition. You can make a separate synagogue. So he made a separate synagogue and asked everybody, please leave the general community. Because the general community is more or less led by the Reform. And here we want to be Torah true. That was one of his, he did Orthodox, but Orthodox, really, the word Orthodox was invented by the Reform. Because in Germany there was a spirit of Protestantism which opposed Orthodox Christianity. And that was the movement amongst the Christians. So the Jews, or progressive Jews, said, we are progressive. And the Orthodox, they keep to all the details of the laws. But we believe in compromise. Let's go and be, some of them said, let's be Christian. In fact, the Reform movement began in quite an extreme manner in Hamburg, where a very, very extreme aspect of the Reform movement, who wanted they asked, that's where the idea was. So many are baptizing themselves, like you know that the sons of Moses Mendelssohn, who was an Orthodox Jew, but at the same time also a great philosopher and a close friend of Lessing. So we know that there was many of the Torah true, they've even banned his translations, commentary. And what happened is, his sons became baptized. But that's how they got bigger positions. You all heard of Felix Mendelssohn. So we know what's going on. But what was the great bastion of Hirsch? So he said, leave them aside. But, there were the leading Talmidei Chachamim of Frankfurt. They said, why should we leave the community? We'll make our own synagogue. We'll keep everything here as it should be. Mikveh and kashrus, everything under the best supervision. Here you've got a best school here in Frankfurt. You've built up. Of course. Why can't this be? Let it be part of the community in general, and maybe it'll affect the community more strongly. And therefore, they asked the Würzburger Rav, who was then the greatest successor later of Boruch, Bamberger, they asked him, do we really have to separate? Otherwise, being a member of the community, you had to pay a tax. And you You have buried in the general graveyard, the general one. They have a special section for the Shomer Shabbos and so on, but still it's in the general burial place. They pay the tax. We don't want to leave it, but after all, the real tradition of the Frankfurt community before Reform became strong was 100% Torah. So let's try to restore it. So they said, we want to get a psak. So they got a psak from Würzburger Road. If somebody builds up a synagogue, Rav Hirsch said, this is the Torah. But somebody, if you want to stay in the community, you want to widen it, if the Rav will have complete autonomy, and the synagogue will run 100% according to all the laws of the Torah, it can help. So they tried to get a rabbi to accept that position. My grandfather accepted the challenge. He was a great Talmid Chacham, and he asked some of the Gedolim if you could follow the psak of the Brit Rav, and they said yes. If you'll have to establish a proper mikveh for the kehillah, you have to establish 100% kashrut under you, and all questions of personal status of divorce and marriage and gerut are entirely under you. So it's an independent. So he built the Bernerplatz synagogue under him, which was 100% Orthodox, run Orthodox. But people could say, I'm a member of the general community. And his words in his response, when he asked also the Gedolim of Hungary, his words are, the great Tzaddik Rav Hirsch works in his way, and I still think I can do something good the other way. And in his house, there were differences of opinion. He would never allow anything detrimental to be said about the other kehillah, because the friction started. Now, most of the members of Rav Hirsch's kehillah refused to resign from the general community. They said, we're Rav Hirsch. So, and my father, Olav Sholem, he told me that when he was a youngster, the 19 letters of Hirsch helped him enormously. And he went and married the daughter of the president of the Hirsch Kehillah. My mother was the daughter of the head who gave constant support. In fact, he started as a worker in a big business, because he had to provide parnosa for the family. His father died young. So this Louis Weiss, my other grandfather, became in the end the head of the second largest metal firm in Frankfurt, in Germany. And he became very rich. But his lifestyle was simple, and he was a great master of loving kindness. He used to send my uncle, the son, every Friday to put money under the doors of people who we felt needed it, without letting them know from where it comes. And he covered the deficit of Rav Hirsch's kehillah every month. And when he came to start in Agudat Israel, which was partly his idea, he paid them. He became the first acting chairman of the Aguda. And the Aguda, as we already discussed, as we already saw, they produced a unification between the Gedolim of the East and the West. The Aguda goes on until today like that in America. His idea was we should unite together to solve all the problems that face the world of Torah today in the light of the greatest sages of the day. That's all about. So in our family, we were raised to respect both the Hirsch kehillah. We went to the synagogue of the Bernerplatz, which was my grandfather's kehillah. And this continued all our lives. So I lived with this understanding that there are two paths which are both of value. Because to represent the way in which we have to decide all questions according to Torah. It needs a spirit of independence. We've got to know we should not be dependent upon any ideas. Torah and Derech Eretz, which is a strong motto of the Hishkit educational Kehillah, does not mean that we make a compromise between Judaism and general humanism. On the contrary, it means that we regard the Torah as being the guide whereby you can learn to judge all aspects of human culture or even of science with the spectacles of the Torah given by Hashem. That's called Hashkafa, Hashkafa the Mishkafayim. Hashkafat Torah is to look through the Mishkafayim of the Torah upon all sciences and all arts that have a source in the human mind and sometimes even the human soul. And that's the real meaning. If you delve in Torah, Im Derech is not a synthesis between Judaism and general culture. If it becomes a synthesis, there's culture, yeah, it's also good, and parallel to it there's Torah. No, the Torah is a guide for every aspect of life. The Torah can teach us which aspects of science to accept and which aspects to reject, which aspects of moral judgments which exist in the world to accept and which ones to reject, and where's the limit? Because this is a very important problem for all mankind. How can we human beings, whom we created indeed with a conscience, but if we just go according to our conscience, it's completely subjective. There's no such thing right and wrong until you think he makes one certain things. It's a mitzvah to kill and murder. And the other one says, no, you're never allowed to kill. What's the right path? How do you know? It says, Lo tirzach, and the Ten Commandments, you shouldn't murder. Nevertheless, it also says in the Torah, you should destroy evil from your midst, and something means killing. So what's the criteria for us today? Today we don't have a Sanhedrin. We're not allowed to make any capital punishment. Nevertheless, there's no such thing as capital punishment in our time, called halacha. But there is such a thing as, he who comes to kill you, kill him first. Self-defense is permissible, and sometimes it's the only right thing to do. But you can only be guided by Torah. Really, in a Jewish state, I mean, how can Haredim, it's a big question, how can Haredim go into the army? Big question. When the army's decisions are not directed according to the principles of Torah. Even let's speak in a general term. We know Rav Yosef came out with the right Basak at one time, yeah, when he said, we cannot exchange, we cannot go and say that we can, in any way, if we're given a clear offer of giving away a section of Eretz Israel, which is now under our dominion, yes, so we have the possibility to keep it, and to give it away to those who want to take it away from us. But if we'll give them a part of Eretz Israel, we are sure that we are not going to have further loss of life. So he said, in principle, that's correct. He said one biggest poskim, and he said, in principle, it's correct. But when he saw that whatever is offered in exchange is entirely unreliable, then you're not allowed to do it, because it's more dangerous. I mean, you have to always know exactly what the position is. It's like the situation is similar with regard to all laws of Pikuach Nefesh. There's a difference whether there's a sick person in front of us or it's a question. For example, you can be Mechalel Shabbos, you're obligated Mechalel Shabbos if there's any danger to life. But does that mean that you're allowed to do research with Chilul Shabbat? Are you allowed to do research desecrating the Shabbat, which may affect a better way of saving lives? It's not allowed. because it's Chol Lefanenu. So it's the same here. It's such questions are very delicate, but it's got to be decided by the Gedolei Poskim. What to do? By the majority, you've got majority opinion. So even army questions also has to be really under the auspices of Piskei Halacha. And to some extent, I know, let's say, Nachum Begin, whom I knew, I had always a chance to speak to him a little bit. Before he did anything, he would ask some of the Gedolim, where he had to make decisions. Should he do it, should he not do it? Yeah. So that's how he made the psak, concerning the nuclear reactor in Iraq, where he destroyed it, Nachum Begin, with the loss of one life. But you have to have a prime minister who's willing to go to them. Go to the Gedolim. Others also consider view of the Gedolim. Certainly in questions of proselytization, giyur, or divorce and marriage, they could decide according to halacha. So, anyway, to go back to my own situation. So when I was able, also fortunate, Hashem gave me the ability to come close to very many of the leading Gedolim of the previous generation. And for 12 years, I was very close to Ben Bait with Minchat Yitzchak, one of the greatest poskim of our time. He was the head of the Bet Din in Manchester, but not the Bet Din of the Auschwitz Gemeinde. That was Machzik Hadas. Machzik Hadas was the Kehillah of the Jews who were raised, and their parents were raised in Torah, and who had strong shiurim and strong shtiblach and everything. Very, very nice, lively Kehillah in Manchester. They're led by Menachem Schneebach today. I was close to his father, and I was learning Chavrusa with him when I was in Manchester. In Manchester, I was Rav of a Kehillah, of the general Kehillah, where some of them, let's say, in the week we had, let's say, 4 or 5 million, 50 people. On Shabbos, we sometimes had 150, 200, depending with the Simcha. And Yom Rosh, we had a few thousand. That was the Kehillah. We had the wider Kehillah. And one of the reasons I was given a few possibilities where to go. So I went, of course, I knew the Minchat Yitzchak was a very great posek. And also, he wasn't Rav just for the Orthodox community. It was Rav for the whole community. Who officially, they had an Orthodox name attached to them. Yeah. They were under the Beis Din, the kashrus of the Beis Din was at a high level. And went to build a mikveh which was better than the other one, because he had, after Minchas Yitzchok, had his education from Eastern Europe, Rosh in Hungary or Romania, by the greatest, by the Mukacher Rebbe and the Urbelzer Rebbe, and was also close to the Satmarov. Yeah, Satmar Rebbe was very close to him. But the Satmarov approved of him becoming rabbi of the Gross Gemeinde, of the general community. Because he knew he's a big tzaddik and he'll be able to achieve many things. He built one of the best mikvahs in England. He didn't want to accept himself, they wanted him to become our best in London, but he felt better in Manchester. So he didn't want to go to Gabriel because it was too complex, but we certainly worked together with London. And he gave some interesting Piskei Halacha. For example, in my shul, we had an early minyan on Shabbos, which was attended by some of the older generation who liked to have breakfast early and then come back and listen to the Rosh and the Chazan, the big Chazon and also something earlier, before I came to the shul. But we had an early minyan, Most of the people who came by car and then went to work on Shabbos. Because in Manchester, many of the Jews worked on the market or in retail, and the main day when Britishers go shopping is on Saturday. So they would go to the market, and that's how they made their money. So they used to come. So I asked Shai, some people said we should abolish it, so many cars around the corner. So I discussed it with Ravais, and I said to him, look, I felt I should keep the minyan and give them work on them to become Shomer Shabbos. As long as there's a minyan, I made sure there's a minyan there of people who keep Shabbos. The old Jews, that was their custom to do that. And I gave a drasha, and also frequently I spoke to individuals there and worked on them. I said different things. I said, all right, you got your business today, come Friday night at least. In the summer you can come Friday night and come with the Suda Shlishit. And as a result, Baruch Hashem, Rabbi said, do it. He was very keen. And I became the student chaplain, the honorary capacity. He constantly gave me support and advice on all questions. He was a person of the greatest sitkut and had a fantastic influence. I'll give you an example. I was able to be Makara with the youth minyan in South Manchester. So I used to take some of the better ones. I took them to rabbis also. One of them is now today one of the biggest teachers of Torah in Israel. He doesn't mind mentioning it. That's a Yaakov Hillel. But I worked hard with him, and Baruch Hashem, say more, he's a great gadol. That's what rabbis helped a lot. So then came the question of rabbis. The Satmarov wanted him to become the Rav of the Eidah Haredis here in Yerushalayim. The most religious, ultra-Orthodox here. And they follow, the Satmarov was their head. See, there's two Satmarov, going back to the previous Satmarov, it's a great Gaon. And he wanted him to be here. Why did he want him to be here? I'll tell you why. Because the Eidah Haredis has different groups. And there's one extreme group, known falsely as Neturei Kata. Neturei Kata means those who guard the city. But the Neturei Kata, they have no posek. They belong to the Eidah Haredis, they want to belong to them. But they have no posek. No gadol supports them. The people who, their rabbis, are on a very low level, you can't put them, there's no posek there. And the Satmarov want to weaken their influence. That's why it brought the rabbis. It's true. He believes in this, that the Medina is a mistake. Yeah? And it's better not to be attached to it. But it's still built here, built a lot of, the Satmar Hasidim have built here big yeshivas and big kehilot all over. They help it, but they think, don't make out as though the survival of the Jewish people is dependent upon the state of Israel, which is run not by Torah. Even if you become a partner with it, but they're going to make things difficult for you. Become a partner. So the other Gedolim, they say, de jure, certainly we don't recognize the government. None of them would celebrate, so it's going to make a celebration of Yom Ha'atzmaut. And they won't sing Hatikva. Yeah? And whatever they do, they try their best to get as many Jews as possible involved in Torah learning. The Lubavitcher Rebbe also. Why the Lubavitcher make a big celebration Lag BaOmer? Because he wants to minimize Yom Ha'atzmaut. Lag BaOmer has a strong background, goes back to the time of the Tanoim, and Yom Ha'atzmaut has become, or was in the beginning in any case, a parade of the strength of Israel. When I first came as a bocher to Eretz Yisrael, so they had banners up, Zeh Hayom, Asad Tzahal, Nagila V'Nisimach, the big parade. This is the day made by the army. Let us rejoice in it.
Nothing.
That was very, very bad. Very, and there were many bad things going. At that time, when I came here, as a bocher to learn yeshiva, I used to have sometimes argued with them. I used to see how they brought Taimani children and others coming from what they called then the curtain, or the flying curtain, the flying, what's it called? The
Iron curtain.
Pardon?
Iron curtain.
Well, the Aliyat Anoah brought many children here to Israel.
Flying carpet.
Flying carpet.
Oh, my.
And they put them into Hashom Etzi Kibbutzim. Yeah? The cut of the payers. So, and therefore, I was big active when I was in Yeshiva with the movement of the Yad La'achim, of the Pi'ilim. Some of them, they went to these camps and tried to save these children. And some of them were imprisoned as a result. I mean, there were battles here. Now, nevertheless, de facto, the majority of the Rabbanim said, we live in Israel, we have a responsibility to bring all the Jews there, and there we have to have the parties, the religious parties, the Haredi parties. And it's came with Ben Gurion. So we come to the situation that each time, election time, the Rasat Marov says, and Ravais, in fact, I was the shliach to take the letter from Ravais to the Rasat Marov. Yeah, so that he should take over, because he was debating whether he should take over or not. But he decided he should take over, and he really had enormous influence here. He strengthened the Eidah Haredis very much, that they've become a pillar of kashrut all over the world, and in other things as well. The more extreme elements are not taken notice of today, as they used to be more. They don't enter into the general Eidah Haredis so much. It's a pity that some of our Talmidim went astray in that direction. We've got one or two Talmidim who learned here, and then they got attached to somebody from Durakata, and it's the wrong direction. And it's not in accordance with the Satmarov, because he wanted to minimize them. They have to follow, they must follow bigger poskim. So here, when, let's say, when Ravais was nifter, so we came closer also to Rabbi Yashiv. We started to Yashiv before him as well. Yashiv, who was probably, he was, for the Ashkenazim, he was the major posek on a level with Avad Yosef. In fact, they were together in the Beit Nagadol. And he went according to the view, as did Yerushalayim Zal Luabach, de facto we have to strengthen the Haredi parties, because that way we can strengthen the yeshivot, but not to feel dependent on them. Because we know, unfortunately, there's a saying, Baal Hamea u Baal Adea. The person who pays you, so he decides questions. And according to the Torah, we should follow the da'at of the Gedolim in contrast to those who pay us. And that we have to work on. In fact, I think, and now the son, the eldest son of Shlomo Zalman has come out much more than the Eidah Haredis. The Eidah Haredis, at the same time, Minchas Yitzchok, he married the sister of the Vishnitzer Rebbe. Vishnitzer Rebbe, going back now 30 years, previous Vishnitzer Rebbe, he was the head of the whole Haredi group, of the Aguda, together with Degel Torah, before Degel Torah. They were together, the Hasidim Misnabim. So he married his sister, and they were such friends. The same applies to Rav Shach, who was the head of the Litvischer Yeshiva group, and who made many decisions when he started with Degel Torah. He had great respect for the Satmar Rebbe, but he said, nevertheless he said, you've all got to vote. All the Gedolem say you have to vote. Nearly all. Well, the Satmar Rebbe says no. Even until today. The Satmar group, they'll say for their own Kehillah, that are really members of their Kehillah, they said don't vote. But they're not going to put, I've never seen, Pashkevilim is called, here the road outside the yeshiva is covered with notes of Lola Tzpia, with a picture of Shmuel Auerbach, but he's a miut. Said he's Pikadol, but I know his father, everybody knows what his father's shitta was. He had a different shitta. And Rav Shach had a different shitta. I know how close, from Shmuel himself, I used to meet him by Rav Shach, was went him. So I don't know, but he thinks that because today it's much more serious than it's ever been. Any case, the din is, Achari Ram Lahatos. Therefore, everybody has to vote for Haredim. And no one should vote for the so-called Mizrahi, because the Mizrahi is not what it was. Not at all. What Bennett, the head of the Mizrahi party, he goes and hugs and works together with Lapid, and they're introducing reform, even reform rabbis. They want to get conservative rabbis, and they're introducing very many non-Torah concepts, also in education. And what's happened? I mean, take the schools of Shuvu, and there's similar schools today for also Shuvu, and there's another organization of schools. It's called Chazon Moshe. It's for the works for Israelis, and Shuvu works for those from previous Russia. They are very successful, and many not yet religious parents send their children to those schools rather than send them to Mamlakti or Mamlakti Dati. Why? Tell you why. Very simple. They have the highest level secular education, just like Rav Hirsch. They're following Rav Hirsch Shitta. Highest level secular education. They train them Bagrut. These are people who come from non-religious homes, and they teach them good behavior. And the other schools suffer very much from rebellion of students against teachers, bringing in drugs, bringing in weapons. That's what goes on in the schools. And no discipline. While they concentrate, they get only Haredi teachers. They get Haredi teachers to go and teach. What happened in the last government? I think they took from their budget, they used to support them with a good few million a year, and they removed it. My friend who's running it, they have a terrific job to cover their budget now. But they removed it. So these schools are highly successful. We used to have a Shabbat of the families. The children, they become very strong in Yiddishkeit, many of them, not all of them, but most of them. And then the parents find out that the Torah and Haredi life teaches people who from the general atmosphere and all the obscenities and the violence that's shown on the mass media, they go into the drug culture, or they go into they become daredevils, and they have no discipline, and they think the older generation is nothing, but we're all progressing to other things, and they're tied to the iPhone, or they're tied to the television screen, the television you see on your hand, the worst things, pornography and everything else. And here, in the Haredi schools, they teach them how to be a mensch. And they work on it hard, and they're successful. So they want to stop it. So how can you not vote? Each vote counts. Everyone is obligated to vote, Acharam Lahatos. because he's had in his mind, I don't think that they spread it like that. The Eidah Haredis, they limit it. They tell their Talmidim and those who are members, we must follow the sheet of the Satmarov, not to support the government. And I'll tell you why it's important. Because I hope this suggestion will be acceptable. That when the Haredi parties get in next, or even their opposition, they should ask the following: why can't the Haredim be treated like the Arabs? There are 12 members of the Knesset who are Arabs. They don't force the Arabs to go to the army. They give them Bituach Leumi. They pay their taxes. I don't quite know how to find out they get government support for different things. So the Haredim, we have got to follow the same policy. We've got to some extent, not entirely, to some extent, accept that the Satmarov was right. And all right, let them speak to their Kehillah. They don't want no voting, no part in the government. But the Haredim, we should say to the government, it's democratic. According to the democratic rules, what right have you to deprive us of anything in the state of Israel, to follow our lifestyle and to put our lifestyle under the authority of the greatest Gedolei HaPoskim? That's also for them, for the Arabs you allow it, for the Christians you allow it. Why not for us? It's discrimination, and that's got to be the policy. It's because I say that it's the same. We go back in the track. Now I see constantly. I'm saying this specifically. I've been following a bit the messages that come out in the paper of the Degel HaTorah, where it's from Steinman, and his spokesman, his writer, he's got a brilliant writer, who happens to be Mechuten as well. I mean, that's Hashem made it, I don't know. He happens to be Yehuda's son got married to his daughter of the main editor, who writes constantly also on the basis of Rav Hirsch. He was very inspired, obviously, by the writing of Rav Hirsch, keeps on quoting him, and he applies it in the present situation. So, I think I want to get this message through. I'll do it now in this manner. It's very important to vote, and then to have a plan. Now, I also discussed maybe a Knesset Gedolah as well, but that's another matter. But meanwhile, the policy should be the official aspect, because here we're faced with the following. We're faced with a situation which it could be to our advantage. Namely, in Israel, more than probably any other country in the world, the government is ultimately ruled by the High Court. Yeah? The power of the High Court, which is developed by one of the Supreme Judge, developed it, they can override the opinions of the elected representatives of the people of Israel in the parliament, in the Knesset. That's the setup here, which doesn't make sense, but still, because the Beit HaMishpat got nothing to do with democracy. The members of the Supreme Court are not elected by the people. No, they're elected by certain other judges and others who can then get to the top and get to the Supreme Court, and they build up a type of elite. Even there's family connections, some of them. So, and the Beit HaMishpat sometimes brings in Jewish law, but more than other times, they bring in aspects of law developed from non-Jewish sources. Ottoman law and common law, Turkish law, all different. And it's not, and there's no question that, okay, in matters that have to do with monetary situations, they can choose if they want to do differently. But in questions that have to do with halachic questions, this group of the Haredim, we do not accept the decision of the Supreme Court. We're not even allowed to go to them normally. You shouldn't go to it. They don't follow Jewish law at all, and some of their judgments are based, for example, upon the ridiculous law that even suspicions of bribery are based frequently on a state witness. And a state witness is bribed. What do you mean? You're attacking here. The longest court case in the Supreme Court is the case against Aryeh Dare. He was put in prison for it. Now the head of Shah. And what's it? It was based on a state witness who regarded a criminal by the Swiss courts because they found him involved with fraud, and to go and tell him, if you will go and give testimony against the other one, then you'll be freed from any form of sentence from us. It's no greater bribery than that. It's called the state witness, which is, sometimes in England you used to say the law is an ass. Well, with regard to this principle, it's indeed something that even an ass would not suggest. So anyway, let's hope everyone will vote, and as a result, the Haredi group will be a strong representation to change the face of Israel so that the Teshuvah movement of Yetz Hashem can grow, and then we'll have the Yerushalayim. Amen.
Amen. Amen.